My family has always been close-knit. Or so I thought. My parents used to live with my brother Jake, his wife, and their two kids. Jake is 35, but has always been sort of dependent on my parents for everything. I mean, they lived in his house, but they took care of almost all his responsibilities. I, on the other hand, am 30 and have my own place, which I bought after years of hard work. I don't earn a fortune, but I manage well. Now, one fine day, I got a call from my mom. She was crying and told me that Jake kicked them out of the house after a huge fight. My heart broke, and without a second thought, I told them they could stay with me. I thought maybe this is temporary and they'll sort things out. Everything was all right for the first week. We were getting along fine and adjusting to the new living arrangements. But then my parents started talking about how they need to support Jake and his family financially. This is when the bomb dropped. My parents told me they want me to pay them rent so that they could continue to support my brother financially. I was flabbergasted. I mean, why would I pay rent in my own house? I felt that it was unfair, especially since I had opened my home to them. I tried explaining to them that what they were asking was not reasonable. I told them they were welcome to stay, but I will not be paying rent for my own house. The tension started to build up in the house. My parents were making me feel like I was the bad guy for not helping out. My mom kept saying how they supported me through college and now it's my turn to return the favor. I decided to call a family meeting, including Jake, to understand what exactly happened. Jake, however, refused to show up, and my parents were vague about the whole incident. They just kept repeating that as family, we need to support each other. I feel torn. I love my parents, but I can't understand why they are hell bent on supporting my brother, who clearly doesn't respect them. It's also taking a toll on my mental health and finances. They haven't spoken to me properly in days, and it's starting to feel like my home has been taken over. Now, I need to decide if I should ask them to leave or succumb to their demands. I am lost and could use some advice. So, AITA for not wanting to pay rent to my parents in my own house while they continue to support my brother who kicked them out? Update 1. I took a lot of advice to heart and decided it was time to have a serious talk with my parents. I was determined not to get emotional, but be firm and honest. I started by telling them how much I loved them and that I wanted them to be happy and safe. But then I made it clear that paying them rent to live in my own house so they can support my brother is not fair. I also mentioned that I'd like to know the full story of what happened with Jake. At first, they were defensive. My mom got emotional and my dad seemed angry. But then something surprising happened. My mom broke down and spilled everything. It turned out that my brother had been borrowing a lot of money from them for years, which they took from their retirement savings. The fight happened because my parents couldn't lend him more money. He was mad and kicked them out. I was shocked and hurt. I asked them why they kept this from me, and they said they didn't want to burden me and felt ashamed. At that point, I felt that we needed to confront Jake together. I called him up and asked him to come over for an urgent family discussion. To my surprise, he agreed. When Jake arrived, the atmosphere was so tense you could cut it with a knife. He started by blaming my parents for being too clingy and demanding. I told him what I had learned and asked him what was going on. After some hesitation, he admitted that he was in debt due to bad investments and needed money. I was upset. But then I thought of something. I suggested that instead of me paying rent to my parents, we could all chip in to help Jake get back on his feet. But he had to make amends and promise to take responsibility for his actions. After a long discussion, we all agreed to the plan. Jake apologized to my parents and they've moved back with him. We worked out a financial plan to support Jake temporarily while ensuring my parents' well-being. They were grateful. But I made it clear that this support is conditional to Jake taking responsibility and making a change. The house feels peaceful again, but my heart feels heavy knowing my family was in turmoil. I just hope we can rebuild from here. I wanted to thank you all again for your words of encouragement and advice. It's been an emotional roller coaster, but I feel like I did the right thing. Update 2. After my last update, I thought things were settled for now, but oh boy, was I wrong. 2 weeks after my parents moved back in with Jake, my dad called me late at night. He sounded distressed and told me that Jake had a massive outburst. He had been shouting and throwing things around. My mom was terrified, and they had locked themselves in a room. I told my dad to call the police, and I drove over as fast as I could. When I got there, Jake was gone, and my parents were shaken up. The police arrived shortly after, and my parents gave their statements. My mom finally admitted that Jake has had anger issues for a long time, but they never wanted to acknowledge it. They said they felt like they failed him as parents. I tried to comfort them and said that we needed to think of a new plan. The next morning, we sat down to discuss the options. My parents decided they can't live with Jake anymore. I offered for them to stay with me, but under the condition that we put together a plan for them to have their place. At the same time, Jake texted me. He was remorseful for what happened and asked to meet up. Reluctantly, I agreed. When we met, he seemed genuinely sorry and told me that he wants to change. He said he realized he needs therapy and help with his financial situation. I told him that I would support him emotionally, but he needed to take charge of his life. I also made it clear that he can't live with our parents anymore. Over the next month, my parents moved back in with me. We helped Jake find a counselor and a financial advisor to work on his debt. We set some strict boundaries. Fast forward a bit, and my parents found a cute little apartment close to my place. I helped them move in, and it's been good. They seem happier. As for Jake, he's been attending therapy and working on his issues. We've had some family counseling sessions too. I can see he's trying, but I am cautious. He also started working with a debt consolidation program to tackle his financial issues. However, amidst all this, I've been emotionally drained. It's been a lot to handle, and I've started seeing a therapist myself to deal with it. I wanted to say thank you again for the support and advice. It's a bumpy road ahead, but I hope it leads to a better place for everyone. Update 3. After my parents settled into their apartment, things seemed to be getting better. My brother Jake was attending therapy, and there was some semblance of peace in the family. However, this peace didn't last long. A couple of weeks ago, I received a call from my mom, sobbing uncontrollably. Apparently, Jake stopped by their apartment and he had lost his job due to some altercation at work. He was furious and demanded money from my parents so that he could pay his rent. I rushed over to their place. When I got there, I tried to calm Jake down, but he lashed out, blaming me and our parents for his misfortunes. I finally snapped and told him that he needed to take responsibility for his actions. That's when he revealed something that shocked us to the core. He confessed that he had taken loans under my parents' names without their knowledge. My mom broke down and my dad was enraged. I immediately kicked Jake out of their apartment and told him not to contact any of us until he sorted his life out. We called the police to report the identity theft and started the process to handle the loan situation. The next week was spent talking to lawyers, banks, and counseling for my parents. They were heartbroken and felt betrayed. I was furious, but also worried about them. That's when I received a message from Jake's ex-girlfriend, Linda. She had seen my previous posts and wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop, and she shared that Jake had a history of taking advantage of people and that she left him for the same reason. She wanted to help and suggested that we stage an intervention for Jake. After discussing it with my family and Jake's therapist, we decided to go through with it. We gathered some close family members and friends and set a date. On the day of the intervention, we all sat in my living room. Jake walked in, and the look on his face was a mix of shock and guilt. We took turns talking to him, sharing how his actions affected us. Surprisingly, Jake broke down and said that he didn't know how to change but wanted to. We presented him with an ultimatum: go to a rehab facility and commit to turning his life around, or he wouldn't have a place in our family. Fast forward to now. Jake has been in rehab for 2 weeks. He has apologized to our parents, and they are cautiously optimistic. My parents are also receiving assistance to handle the identity theft situation. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, but I feel like there is a glimmer of hope. We're taking baby steps towards rebuilding trust. However, I have made it clear that Jake has a long way to go. A big thank you to this community for your support and advice. I'm still seeing my therapist, and I think I've grown through this experience. Update 4. Jake has been in rehab for over a month now, and he's been actively participating in therapy. The rehab center has family therapy sessions once a week, and we've been attending them. The sessions are grueling emotionally, but it feels like progress is being made. Meanwhile, my parents and I have been working on sorting out the financial mess Jake left behind. We met with a financial advisor who helped us set up a plan to consolidate and pay off the loans Jake took out in their names. It's going to be a long road ahead, but at least there's a plan in place. A couple of days ago, my dad received a call from one of his old work buddies. They chatted for a bit, and then his friend mentioned that there was an opening at his company and thought my dad would be perfect for it. Now, my dad is retired, but he's always been restless and enjoyed working. After discussing it with my mom and me, he decided to take the job. The income would certainly help with the financial situation. On a different note, my relationship with my parents has dramatically improved through this ordeal. We talk openly about feelings, concerns, and plans. They have expressed their gratitude for my support and apologized for their previous behavior. Then, out of the blue, my mom asked me if I'd be okay with her inviting Jake to spend a day with us as a family after he gets out of rehab. I had mixed feelings about it. After all that had happened, I was still cautious about letting him back into my life. But after some thought, I agreed on the condition that it would be in a neutral public space and that it was just one day for now. Fast forward to the day we met at a local park. I have to admit, seeing Jake again was surreal. He looked healthier and seemed genuinely happy to see us. We spent the day talking, playing some board games, and even laughed together. However, I could tell that behind Jake's smile, there was regret and guilt. He pulled me aside at one point and apologized for everything. I could see the sincerity in his eyes. I told him that rebuilding trust would take time, and it's on him to prove that he's changed. He agreed. The day ended on a high note. My parents were elated to see us all together, and there was this strange feeling of hope in the air. In the car ride back home, my mom broke down crying, saying it felt like we're finally becoming a family again. So that's where we are right now. I'm cautious but hopeful. The financial situation is far from resolved, but we're working on it. Jake seems like he's making an effort, and my parents are starting to rebuild their lives. I just wanted to share this update and say thank you again. You guys have been a pillar of support. Here's to taking life one day at a time. Update 5. It's been around 3 months since the last update, and a lot has changed. Jake has officially completed his rehab program and is now living in sober living community. He is attending meetings, seeing a therapist, and even found a part-time job. My parents visit him every weekend and say that he is genuinely trying to rebuild his life. He even set up a payment plan to gradually repay my parents for the money he owes them. Now, onto my parents. My dad's new job is going well, and he seems happier than he has been in a long time. The financial situation is still tight, but it's getting better. They've been attending therapy and working on their relationship as well. My mom, however, had a health scare last month. She was hospitalized for a few days, and during this time, the reality of how financially strained they are really hit home. During my mom's hospitalization, I decided to take a step further to help them. I offered to let them live in my house permanently if they contribute towards utilities and groceries. I did this with the condition that Jake is not allowed to move in. My parents were overwhelmed with gratitude. My mom cried and thanked me profusely. My dad, a man of few words, shook my hand and told me how proud he was of me. For the next few weeks, we started turning my house into a real home for all of us. We set up a proper bedroom for them and began making family meals together. It felt like a fresh start for everyone. Now, here's where things get a bit complicated. Jake, who had been making significant strides in his recovery, heard about this arrangement and wanted to be a part of it. He reached out to me pleading to let him move in. He said he's changed and that he needs his family's support. This put me in a difficult position. I was torn between wanting to help my brother and protecting the sanctuary I had built for my parents and myself. After much contemplation, I decided to set up a family meeting with Jake, my parents, and a counselor from Jake's sober living community. We sat down and had an open and honest discussion about our fears, hopes, and expectations. Jake made a case for himself, explaining how much progress he made, promised to abide by any rules we set. The counselor advised that family support could be beneficial, but stressed the importance of boundaries. I agreed to let Jake move in under strict conditions. He would continue attending therapy, contribute to household expenses, and any signs of relapse would mean he has to leave. We also decided as a family that any major decisions or issues would be discussed openly among all of us. So Jake moved in. The house is now full, but it feels like a family home. It's not perfect, and we've had our share of hiccups and disagreements, but we are working through them as a family. This feels like a second chance for all of us, and we are cautiously embracing it. Update 6. Hello, everyone. OP here with the final update. It's been a roller coaster, but I think things have settled down enough for me to share how everything turned out. Jake had been living with us for a few months, and honestly, it was working out better than I expected. We had family dinners, movie nights, and he was really helping around the house. He was still going to therapy, and he even started attending a local community college. However, one evening, my mom found a suspicious-looking bottle in Jake's room. She brought it to me, and we confronted him. He admitted that it was prescription medication that he wasn't prescribed. My heart sank. We had a family meeting where I reminded Jake of the rules we had set. He broke down, saying he didn't know how to deal with the pressures of life without something to take the edge off. We decided that Jake had to leave the house, but we would still support him in finding another place to live and getting the help he needs. After Jake moved out, things were tense with my parents. My mom especially was heartbroken. I realized that for the sake of their well-being, we needed a different plan. I spoke to a financial advisor and managed to work out a deal where I could buy a small apartment nearby and rent it to my parents at a very affordable rate. This way, they would have their own space but still be close. They agreed to this plan. Around this time, my work also started picking up, and I realized I wanted to focus on my own life too. So my parents moved into their apartment. I helped them set up, and it's a nice little place. They still come over for dinner sometimes, and I visit them. It's a good balance. Now, the final update on Jake. After leaving the house, he went back to rehab. He then decided to join a program that helps recovering addicts build work skills. The last time we spoke, he told me he's thinking about becoming a counselor himself. He's also been attending support groups. As for me, having the house to myself again made me realize how much I missed my own space and independence. I started dating again, and I've been seeing someone for a few months now. It's still early days, but it feels nice to have someone in my life. In reflection, this entire experience was chaotic, emotional, but it was a learning journey. We all had to face some hard truths and make some difficult decisions, but in the end, I feel like we're all in a better place. Thank you to everyone who offered advice, shared their experiences, and supported me through this crazy time. Your words help more than you know. To anyone going through something similar, don't be afraid to set boundaries, but also remember that family is precious. Be there for each other, but not at the expense of your own well-being. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.